Okay.
Hong Jiang, thank you for coming down.
We're on already.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So tell us a little about yourself. You teach geography at UH. I want to know more.
Okay. I teach geography at UH, and my research is on China, and primarily on cultural geography and the environment in China. And I have become very interested in human rights issues in China in recent years because of various reasons. One is I have a relative in China. My aunt practices Falun Gong, and she was sentenced to 7 years in prison in 2007.
For what crime?
They found Falun Gong material at her home, and that was a crime.
What about the First Amendment?
Well, never existed in China. The Chinese constitution said you can freely practice, but then that never was in practice. So her crime was subversion of state power.
By having these materials in her home.
That's right. And since China started the persecution of Falun Gong in 1999, this was the crime given to all Falun Gong practitioners. It doesn't matter what you do, and all of them are not criminals. They just, were arrested because of their belief.
Why don't you talk about the Falun Gong so people know what it is and when it started, how it started, who's involved, and what the Chinese government does about it.
So Falun Gong, I think we need to go back just a little bit to Chinese culture. Chinese culture is ancient culture. There has always been these different kind of practices, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, all of which are ways of life. And Falun Gong was one of them. It's not a new practice. It's actually an ancient practice that was passed down in private teachings from teacher to teacher, teacher to disciples. And in 1992, the current teacher made it available to the public for the first time in history. People think of Falun Gong as new, but it's very, very old. So what is Falun Gong? It's I call it a way of life that incorporates the practice of both the mind and body. It's almost like a combination of yoga and Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism.
You haven't mentioned politics yet.
Politics?
What does Falun Gong have to do with politics?
It has nothing to do with politics, and this is how people are really misunderstanding what Falun Gong is. So it has 5 sets of exercises: movement meditation, sitting meditation, and if you finish all 5 sets, it's about 2 hours. And people try to do that on a daily basis to improve their body, improve their health. That's one part. The other part is cultivation of the mind, the heart, based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance.
So far, you haven't said anything objectionable.
Nothing objectionable.
What's the difference between Falun Gong and Tai Chi?
Okay, so Tai Chi is a form of a body practice in China. It's all similar in the way that they're both kind of ancient. And Falun Gong, I would say, is even more ancient, dating further back. And the Tai Chi today doesn't really have the teaching attached to it anymore. There are a lot of different Qigong practices in China that all kind of coming from the Chinese history, and most of them don't have teaching attached to it anymore. And Falun Gong is an exception because it has a teaching attached to it, and the teaching part about cultivating yourself to be truthful, compassionate, and tolerant. That is very, very important part of the practice.
Sounds like Buddhism to me.
It's very similar because compassion is about Buddhism.
Yeah.
And, truthfulness is a focus of Taoism. And when we talk about tolerance, everybody would think about, Confucianism, right? It's really part of the ancient Chinese culture. And that's in the ancient times before the different schools were separated into Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. There are these holistic teachings. Falun Gong was one of them, and it's also called Falun Dafa.
Mm-hmm. So why is the Chinese government so upset about it?
That's right. So why everybody now think of it has anything to do with politics? So in China, Falun Gong started in 1992. The government supported it, given awards to Falun Gong practitioners and to the teacher of Falun Gong. the various awards because Falun Gong was so popular in China and so many people practice it and improve their health, improve their work relations, family relations. So government gave various awards. In 1996, the government started to secretively started to investigate on Falun Gong. And this really has a lot to do with the Chinese politics, because that was the time Jiang Zemin was the secretary of the state, the Communist Party, and there are these factions that following him really wanted to real power, and it's in the Chinese administration, it's a political legal branch. Mm-hmm. So these people wanted to gain power by looking at what might be undermining the Communist Party. So that's one administrative kind of a factor. Another thing is that Falun Gong quickly attracted about 70 to 100 million people in China. That's more than the number of Communist Party members.
Really? Interesting.
And party
in the
member
larger
at that
picture,
time,
it's a small fraction of the population, but more than the Chinese Communist Party members. That's interesting.
So at that time, Communist Party had about 60 million members. And the 70 to 100 million Falun Gong practitioners, that was given by the Communist Party investigation, because the Falun Gong is like a grassroots. People here in Honolulu practice Falun Gong. They go to the park. Not everybody go to the park to practice together. So you don't really have an accurate count of how many people practice, unless you have this kind of government investigation and their data came out. And that was one of the thing that concerned the Communist Party. And the other thing is
the fact that they came together, they were a group in public.
Group in public,
but
that was another thing.
What's the difference between that and Tai Chi?
Well, the difference would be the Falun Gong group was much larger than any other group.
Okay.
And that became a kind of a potential fear, source of fear for the party. They probably thought, I can only guess because, they probably thought, oh, what if this group become organized, opposing the Communist Party? Although they should know better, the teaching of Falun Gong said specifically that this is not related to any politics. This is a personal, private cultivation. People get together because they find it helpful to work together in a park and to meditate in a park. The other thing that's very important is to understand Chinese political system. This is a system that's controlled by Communist Party. And, with all the words about openness and liberal changes, the government is still Communist Party controlled, one-party government. So when the head of the government says that we're going to take this group out, nobody really can stop it. It's still a dictatorship. There's no check and balance. And then the people who followed him were just pushing on the policy of persecution.
So it sounds like in the 90s this became a problem a problem at all, because there were a lot of people attached to an organization over which the Chinese government did not have control, mm-hmm. and which, in a paranoid view of things, might somehow be a problem on the political scene, even though there was really very little likelihood that would ever happen. It's almost like it got to be a political football, mm-hmm. maybe a political mistake, resulting in some real repression. So what kind of repression have we had? So
the mistake that I think the Communist Party made was that they thought with the state machine, in 3 months, Jiang Zemin, the head of the Communist Party, said, we're going to root out Falun Gong in 3 months.
Finish
it. Yeah. And they started to launch in 1999, July of 1999. They launched this large-scale persecution of Falun Gong. You see the reporting on newspapers, TV, media, everywhere, schools. Students have to learn the right answer about Falun Gong being bad and evil. And so this is a propaganda campaign all over China. And what they didn't know is the staying power of Falun Gong, because people really practice, take Falun Gong teachings in their heart. They not only see the improvement in their health, they also really feel, being truthful, compassionate, and tolerant. That is the truth of life. That's giving meaning to life. And when you find the meaning of life, it's very hard to say, well, that's false. And so people are saying, well, we're not going to give up Falun Gong. And then the government was at the point that they started to escalate the persecution, continuously. And so what happened was that a lot of people were arrested, like my aunt was arrested, tortured, and a lot of them tortured to death. You don't know how many. There are only verification of thousands who were tortured to death. And the other thing that's very, very disturbing is the information that came out since 2006 is the organ harvesting. So the Chinese state has these systematic measures, locations that held Falun Gong practitioners. And each location could be holding thousands of them. Nobody really know how many of those locations. Information from one of those locations came out.
Are you saying there's a connection between Falun Gong, the repression of Falun Gong, and organ harvesting, that they're connected?
Yes.
What's the connection?
Okay, maybe I should talk about organ harvesting as a separate thing, because we all hear in the U.S. that Chinese government has been harvesting organs from death row prisoners. And that's something, it's like a known knowledge that started in China in 1980s. The death row prisoners were not shot dead, they were knocked out. Their organs were harvested when they were still alive. So that's how you keep the organ. That's how you can sell the organ for a large sum of money. But death row prisoners, there are these published data about how many they were. I mean, itself is so cruel. It's atrocity to take people's organs.
Yes.
And so that's one part of it. And since the 1999, when Falun Gong was started to be persecuted, when you see the Chinese government data and the hospitals start to have a rapid increase of organ transplantation, and in the 2000s, China became a center of organ transplantation for the world.
Exporting.
Not just exporting, they draw in visitors, international visitors, and people go to China to get their organs. And people know that this is the place you can get your organs. And where did you get this source of organ? Suddenly you have this increase, right? The death row prisoners didn't get increased. And then in 2006, information came out. First, it was this woman who called herself Anna. Anna came out of northeast China from a hospital. And her husband was a surgeon in the hospital. And her husband was involved in systematic removal of organs from Falun Gong practitioners. And according to Anna, and she heard from her husband, there's these complicated stories. Her husband was involved. Initially, he would not want to say anything to anybody, but you can see his state of mind was not stable. He had these, night sweat and psychological abuse.
Feeling guilty about what he was doing.
That's right. And later on, he revealed to his wife that he had operated on 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners. All of them were alive. And he was taking out the cornea. But other people were taking out the hearts, the liver, whatever you can think of. It's a systematic operation. And when you're in it, you can't get out of it. So he was trying to get, the husband was trying to get out of it, was almost killed. And but he did dare not to say anything. Anna came out of China, started to reveal this. So that's the first information came out of that.
Let me just stop you for a minute. So the process is you have a death row criminal, or you have Falun Gong, increasingly in the middle of the 2000s, and the 2005 or 6, you should say, 2006 it was.
2006, that's when the first, the information was revealed for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if they would catch somebody who was a Falun Gong, then they would give him some kind of drug to sedate him, like for an operation.
It goes beyond that. So in China, a lot of Falun Gong practitioners appeal to the government. in 1999, suddenly this beautiful, wonderful practice became the illegal, evil practice.
Yes.
And these people, Falun Gong practitioners everywhere in China, they felt like this is unfair, and the government probably just didn't have the information.
Yeah.
I need to go in and tell them from my personal experience that Falun Gong is good. So they go in there, tell the government, there's an appealing office the government set up. Supposedly, you can go in and appeal. But as soon as you go in and you ask the question, are you a Falun Gong practitioner? And the Falun Gong practitioners are practicing truthfulness. They wouldn't say no. They say yes. And then immediately you're taken away.
Disappeared.
Okay. And there's no warrants or anything. A lot of Falun Gong practitioners disappeared. Where did they go to? Nobody knew. And then this information, 2006, came out, is from Northeast China. Came from with the information about
is this
the
Harbin?
location in Sujiatuan.
Okay.
It's close to Shenyang, Northeast province.
Okay.
And so the information come out of Anna was saying this place, when she left, altogether this place held about 6,000 Falun Gong practitioners.
In prison?
In prison. There was almost like a concentration camp. That nobody knew the location of the camp. And then this camp was connected to the hospital that she worked for.
So the hospital was specializing
That's right.
in this.
Given her information.
Yes.
And so when she left, she said 3,000 Falun Gong practitioners were already disappeared. There are over 2,000 left there. She suspected those 2,000 were gone later
Let me
on.
try to get a handle on the experience. So the experience is the prisoner, Falun Gong, would be taken to the associated hospital, and doctors like Anna's husband, would then give them anesthetic, I guess, and put them to sleep.
That's right, yeah.
And
yeah.
then harvest as many organs as they could,
They could use.
take everything out.
And then the
and
bodies were just disposed
And then they would
of.
die.
That's
They
right.
would die in the course of the operation.
That's
as a
right.
removal.
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's just horrible to even imagine
It
something
is.
like that. And the information was corroborated by another journalist. Again, this is a journalist who got this information about the same concentration camp in Sujiatuan and came out of China and reported to a couple of news sources, Chinese media in the U.S. You can't report anything to the Chinese media in China, right? All Chinese media controlled by China. One is called the Epoch Times. The other is a TV station called New Tong Dynasty Television.
So let's take a segue on that for a minute. So you gave me your card, and it says NTD, and that's the television station you're talking about.
That's right, yeah,
NTD
yeah.
Television.
Yeah.
And it's at the site ntdtv.com, and it's based out of New York.
So yeah, it's based out of New York City and has substations in many different cities in the U.S. and in the world, and so NTD is part of the oceanic cable here
in Hawaii.
And came here about 3 years ago. So I started to volunteer for the TV station about 2.5 years ago.
So this card is for you as the Deputy Regional Director of NTD TV Hawaii.
That's right.
And you're a
yeah.
volunteer in that regard.
That's right, yeah.
And it's a nonprofit, is that right?
That's right. It's a volunteer base. It's almost like the PBS in Chinese in the U.S. So the NTD, New Tong Dynasty Television, is about truthful reporting, now being under the censorship of the Chinese government.
What's the relevance of the Tong, New Tong? Does that refer back to Chinese history?
That's right. If you look at Chinese history, Tang Dynasty is the peak of Chinese cultural development,
Okay.
about 1,200 years ago.
Okay.
And so New Tang Dynasty television has, I think, a couple of meanings. One is it gave the Chinese people globally real information about what's really happening in China. So every day they're half an hour reporting on China's uncensored news with English subtitles. And, people can tune into
So I can-
698.
698 is the channel here in Hawaii on
Hawaii.
Oceanic Cable.
That's right.
So I can look at what you're talking about on channel 698 right now.
Exactly. And you can also watch it from the website, ntdtv.com.
The streaming video.
Streaming, yeah.
Very good, very good.
So our TV station here had also reported on the organ harvesting. So coming back to this whole issue of organ harvesting, has reported on it. So that's 2006. And then here you have just two evidence, two people come out to say this is happening. And then more information came out of China, and that triggered a international investigation by two people. And these two people are David Kilger, who's a former Canadian member of the parliament. He was also a Secretary of the State for Asia Pacific. So he knows a lot about these kind of international politics. And he and his partner, David Matas, David Matas is a well-known human rights lawyer in China, in Canada. So this pair, two Davids, started an investigation. They heard this news about the atrocity of harvesting organs from people who are alive. It was just, they felt the responsibility to launch an investigation. Of course, anything in China, you can't get in there. You can't have an eyewitness saying, those people who are whose organs are harvested, they're already dead. So there's no eyewitness information.
Well, that's interesting, because a regular visitor to China, a tourist visitor to China would say, well, okay, so there's security, police around, and yes, it's a kind of tough central government, but you don't see it as that effective, that efficient, that nasty. And then you hear about this, and the fact that it's been kept under a lid so well.
That's right, yeah.
And then you take a different view of it. This is real serious now.
Definitely, yeah. So what this investigation did, led by these two Davids, is that they investigated into a lot of indirect information. They had over 30 different kinds of information, including something so direct. They actually pose as potential client for organ transplantation, made calls to Chinese hospitals, and recorded this information, recorded the conversation. They called into the hospitals to say, well, I have a relative who needed an organ. How long is it going to be the wait? Well, they tell you, very quick, within a month, we promise to have your kidney, have your heart.
So the hospital was actually trading with the public on this.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can make a call like that.
Yeah, you can, because, it's a transplantation center open to the world. So, of course, they answer questions, right?
Yeah.
So the short waiting time is one thing. The other thing is that some people call in to say, I heard that you have Falun Gong organs. Falun Gong organs are good because they are known to be healthy. And I also wanted live.
High quality organs.
Yeah. And they said, yes, we can promise that. And some doctors would say, yes, we can promise that. And there's no problem about it. And so these are the things that's going on. The short waiting time was something shocking to the doctors. And that's what later on, since the last couple of years, some doctors start to be involved. Why? International standard for the wait time for a kidney is like sometimes years. In the U.S., you're talking about years.
You have to wait for the organ to be available almost at random because of an accident or some untoward event.
Yeah.
But here it's methodical and systematic.
How can you ever plan that? How can you say, I promise within, sometimes the hospitals promise within a week we'll get you a matching organ.
Yeah.
And within a month, everything will be finished.
Yeah.
The operations and everything. And with the kidney, I don't know the medical side of it. From what I read, you have to have not only accidental availability of the organ, it has to be matching. There are a lot of tissue matching, blood matching that has to happen, and you have to have a live bank in order to promise that you can give the transplantation within a set time. So doctors were just alarmed. And it's, they were talking about how it's almost like you have a fish tank in a restaurant. A customer come in to say, I want that one. And that person that fish was pulled to be killed. So it's just horrible to even think about it. And
So now this is, but the people, who were the buyers.
yeah,
The buyers. I mean, of course, they're in duress, or they wouldn't be looking for an organ.
That's
and
right.
It could be life and death for them.
It is, yeah.
But do they know that they're getting an organ that's harvested from a living person?
They do not know. I mean, the other thing that's corroborating everything is there are Falun Gong practitioners who were detained in concentration camps, in prisons, who find their way out. Sometimes it's because their organs were so bad that they were abandoned, and they came out and they continue the practice, they recover, and they report their experience. When they were in Chinese labor camps, they were treated with torture. At the same time, they were put into a medical procedure of a very thorough medical check. They had no idea at the time what was going on.
It's just not for their health.
Not for their health at all. But they were checked, and the liver and everything. And people who were under those kind of procedure didn't know. They were curious. Why did they care about our health? They were torturing us, right? Later on, they realized what's happening. Even sometimes, occasionally, these Falun Gong practitioners were threatened by some guards to say, we're going to send you into a place that nobody ever will find you. And nobody knows how many of those concentration camps there are in China. And there were certain people called in from an anonymous medical doctor in the high level of the Chinese military saying there are 36 of them, but nobody knows. And they also said each one has a code name. Nobody knows. So those were the things. It was a huge operation. The government was involved. And the military hospitals were involved. And so that's what's happening. On the receiving side, somebody come into China and get an organ, of course, it's a great thing for them. They can get their life saved. On their side, they get this consent form. I mean, you can imagine how easy it is to sign a consent form in the Chinese situation. Anybody can sign it.
Yeah.
And there was one revelation of somebody, again, this information, the people didn't dare to say their names. But it was one medical doctor who said he's seen 6,000 consent forms signed by just one source. That, anybody can sign those, right? So that's what's happening.
It's a huge cover-up
It
going
is.
on.
It is huge. And then another thing that's happening last year, that this issue started to come up again, because last year, last year February, this head of chief of police in China, Wang Lijun, from southwest China, from Sichuan, Chengdu, defected to the U.S. consulate. If you remember that incident, that he wanted to get asylum, and the U.S. consulate didn't receive him. He stayed there for 24 hours, and he was let go, and then he was arrested by the Chinese government, later on trialed for treason. And the reason he went in there was because he had a fallout with Bo Xilai, who is this other high-ranking official in China.
Everyone knows about Bo Xilai.
Everybody knows Bo.
Yeah.
Bo's wife killed the British businessman.
Yeah.
So all of them were somehow involved in organ harvesting.
Really?
And
including
here,
Bo Xilai and the wife?
Bo Xilai and the wife and Wang Lijun. Well, I should say there's suspicion that they were.
Okay.
Information are not coming out. But here's what we know. So Wang Lijun got a public award around 2006. As a police, he head up a research to inject into death row prisoners to prolong their life, allowing time for their organs to be harvested. And the at the award ceremony, he actually bragged about how this new invention research was applied to thousands of people. So we know something, that his work was entering into organ harvesting from live people. That's one thing. The other thing is there were some data that suspicion that's coming out that he actually had given the U.S. consulate, while he was staying at the U.S. consulate for 24 hours, he had given the U.S. consulate information about Bois' involvement, Bois-Hilai's involvement in organ harvesting from live people, and also selling of human bodies, body parts. And some people connect those body parts to the bodies factory, some of which corpse landed at this international corpse exhibition, the body exhibition. You
Oh,
remember?
yes, I saw that.
There was one coming
That
to
was here.
Honolulu.
That was here. Yeah.
There's no hard evidence to make that claim, but there were actually information here and there coming out. So nobody really know Bo's involvement there, really, about what's really happening. Why his wife killed the British businessman.
We go back to the fact that he was in the American embassy and ultimately rejected.
That's right, yeah.
Why did they reject him? He had very valuable information, for the world.
That's
that
right,
was
yeah.
of great interest to, all human rights in the world. Why did they send him away?
Nobody knows about these high-level politics, and also the U.S. State Department is not revealing any information. What's interesting is that just last week, there's this former U.S. Ambassador to China came to East-West Center to give a talk about China-U.S. relationship. And afterwards, I was asking him this question, because he's high up. He's working at the U.S.-China committee there, working closely with the government about these high-level relationships. And I asked him about this very thing about organ harvesting from live Falun Gong practitioners. There's some indication that Wang Lijun had the information he had given to the U.S. State Department. And this former ambassador was saying, well, usually the U.S. State Department gave him, any information related to China. But for Wang Lijun's information revealed by Wang Lijun, none. So nobody knows.
So, but maybe the U.S. government knows more than it is saying on this.
Some suspicion that they do. So that there's one change in the U.S. Department report, because the organ harvesting from live Falun Gong practitioners, this came out 2006. U.S. government didn't respond, didn't say anything until last year's human rights reports on China. The U.S. government had a paragraph that included this, that it's reported that the Chinese government has been harvesting organs from Falun Gong practitioners and from the Uyghurs. So that's the first time U.S. government had the report information in their report.
The Uyghurs, I remember the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are Muslim living in the southwest.
In northwest China.
Northwest China.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about the Uyghurs and why they get drawn into this.
They got drawn into it that was research done by Ethan Gutman, who was a well-known researcher, reporter on China. He'd written books on China. And he, in his association doing research on China, he came upon this information, and he also interviewed doctors that prior to 1999, it's the Uyghurs who get their political prisoners who get their organs harvested for transplantation. But after 1999, when there are so many Falun Gong sources, then there weren't much going on with the Uyghurs.
The relative numbers involved.
That's right. And that all switched to Falun Gong, because Falun Gong, you're talking about huge hundreds of thousands, at least, sometimes, it's hard to say, millions of people, Falun Gong practitioners, were imprisoned. One report from the U.S. State Department a few years back is they estimated that about half of the inmates in China's labor camps are Falun Gong practitioners.
Extraordinary. I remember there were, I wish I'd followed it more closely, because at the time, I don't think any of us realized just how serious this was. But there were issues about human rights in the Clinton administration, and I think they were mad at him because he was raising that issue, and maybe to some extent in the Bush administration also. But at the time, it seems like the issue of organ harvesting was really not a public issue. We didn't know that much. We didn't know it all.
That's right, yeah. It's actually a known fact in China, how it's done, and these articles you can read about personal experiences. So that's kind of a known, but it's still covered up, because if U.S. Government wanted to bring up issues about human rights to the forefront, then this will be easily brought up. There are many other things that can be brought up, but I think the U.S. government has not been, really staying firm on principle in terms of relationship with China.
In anticipation of our discussion today, I mentioned this to a friend of mine. Told me that a relative of his was living in Hong Kong and needed a transplant. And somebody that he knew, some connection person that he knew, said, "Hey, no problem. You can go to China. We'll arrange it. You can have an organ in no time at all.
See,
whatever organ you like, we can set that up."
That's right. Yeah.
And he said, "I know where those organs come from." He said, "I'm not doing that. I'd sooner let nature take its course."
I see.
So what I'm saying is, I think that people
Interesting.
on the street, people who have these transplant issues, they know what's going on. This is
lot of
information that
people
is
do.
available.
That's right. And that's why the doctors were involved, because they want to educate their patients about the implications of what they do, travel to China to get the organ. And there's just late last year, December, there's this petition on the web, petition to the U.S. government to do something about this organ harvesting. And the website is called organpetition.org. organpetition.org. So anybody can go in there and check for more information about organ harvesting in China and what's the implications and more information about it. And for them, they wanted the medical community to be involved. And this organ petition was initiated by two doctors, one of whom is, Arthur Kaplan, who's the head of the Division of Bioethics at the New York University's Longan Center. So doctors are concerned, and they want to educate their patients, and also responses to these organ, information for organ harvesting from different countries. Israel has a very quick response because they initially allowed kind of a insurance coverage for people to travel to another place, to China, to get their organs, and now they cancel that.
Yeah, well, I think it would be somewhat sensitive in Israel because during the Holocaust there were Nazi doctors
Exactly.
doing experimental operations on people, really
That's
horrendous.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
In fact, there's a movie out called it'll come to me, The Debt. It's called The Debt. It's about some Mossad agents that go after a Nazi doctor criminal.
That's
Which brings
right.
me to my next question, and that is, the doctors in China, don't they have the same ethical obligations as doctors around the world? How can they, abuse their ethical obligations this way? It's no question that this is completely unethical under any medical approach at all.
Exactly. And I think I can't quite, the example that we have of that doctor whose wife later revealed the information, he was under such a tremendous psychological stress because apparently his conscience was still there. He knew this is wrong, but then he had to stay in because he had to protect his life. So it's a system that once you're locked in, you continue to do bad.
It's not like the mafia in its own
that-
way. The
that's-
omerta, don't say a word.
That's right. This is what the system does. And I think the medical doctors probably also fear for for kind of retribution for themselves, because if you're found to be involved in this kind of atrocity as a medical doctor, would they be facing some kind of punishment if they admit it?
Of course.
So that actually a double pressure for them not to say anything.
Right.
And it's a horrible life for them.
They've been completely compromised.
Exactly. So it's very, very hard for them to do anything.
So now that we have this information leaking out, you mentioned some of the journalists who have, and some of the doctors who've been complaining and I guess trying to get some traction.
That's right.
What does the Chinese government say? Do they deny it?
Oh, they denied it. They denied it outright. So so 2006, when this information about the Sujiatun, this concentration camp, information came out, the Chinese government didn't respond in 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, the Chinese government responded to saying everything's wrong, everything's just a hearsay, it's a fabrication. They can invite people to come in to the hospital. You can investigate. Of course, you only need 1 day for everything to be
Sure,
cleaned
clean
out.
it up. Yeah.
And the U.S. consulate was invited to make the visit. And the U.S. consulate couldn't find anything. And so that was the end of that. I think it's interesting. You have such a, hear these stories, it's just atrocity. It's genocide against humanity.
Can you think of anything worse that's going on in the world today? I mean, this
It
is almost
is.
like the killing field.
It is a killing field. It is literally called a new form of evil on this planet by the two Davids,
Yeah.
whose report is published in a book called The Bloody Harvest.
Yeah.
And you can actually check out the whole book on the website, The Bloody Harvest, or
So,
go to organpetition.org and you find all the information.
so it sounds like there are objections and revelations popping up in various quarters around the world, and I guess NTD New Tong Dynasty Television would like to carry this as much as possible.
They continue to report on new information coming out, so people can find more information. I think the one kind of central location to find information is organpetition.com, because that website also pull in some of these newspaper or TV reporting into that website.
So you have journalists, you have doctors, you have organizations of Chinese people outside of China
Yeah,
who are very concerned about this.
Yeah.
But where's the traction? I mean, it sounds like the United States was like put off in their inquiry.
That's right.
It sounds like nobody is taking affirmative action
No.
to put pressure on the Chinese government to stop it, because the Chinese government simply denies it. So,
That's the sad part. That's the sad part. That what to do now? That the Chinese government outright denies it, and that doesn't allow any investigation going into China. Doesn't even allow Red Cross, this kind of organization, third party, no government, non-government entities to go in, and you continue to have these reports, and even like any doctor hearing these things, how can you schedule a operation for transplantation unless you can schedule a accident or accidental availability of an organ?
doctors outside of China must be akamai about this, and they're
they
probably
know.
saying, no, I'm not going to do that.
That's right, yeah.
Because they make themselves complicit
That's
by
right.
setting it up.
Yeah. So I think what can you do? In the long run, Chinese government has to change in order for any of these problems to go away. And before that's happening, I think there are several things people can do outside of China. One is, I'm an educator, so for me, education is very, very important, raising awareness through the TV station, through other media, and, outside of China, letting more people know about these problems.
But you're very courageous in speaking so openly about it. Are you concerned? Are you afraid?
Well, I'm not going to China. I'm from there, and I'm an American citizen now, and I still, I don't think I don't want to visit China. Even if they gave me a visa, they probably wouldn't give me a visa to go to China anyway, because they probably have me on that blacklist, like many other people who are speaking up about these issues.
The disconnect, and I referred to this earlier, is that at a certain level, you go to China as a tourist or maybe as a returning Chinese, and you see positive things happening, in the economy, and the country is bursting at the seams with new and vital activity and all that, even though they may have a little economic up and down once in a while.
Right. Yeah.
But mostly, it's a good story. And then further, talk to people, and they can get on the internet, and there may be silly censorship stuff, but they can get around it. There's all kinds of ways with dishes and special software where they can beat the censors.
That's right. Yeah.
And they can get all kinds of stuff, and they can probably get NTD actually. In
Many
China,
people can. You have to get this anti-blocking software.
Yeah. So
that's
so
right, yeah.
then that means that the average Chinese person with any connection, internet connection, I guess, is going to know about this, and be as offended as anyone else in the world would be about it, I guess. Or do they tolerate it for some cultural or legal reason, or fear? What is it? Does the average Chinese person, how does he feel about it?
Here's the difficulty. I've come from China, lived in China, and know people, have friends and family members in China. When you live inside China, And you hear these things over and over and over about the Falun Gong being evil, and Falun Gong, when you practice Falun Gong, you'll kill yourself and you kill others, and the government make all these lies, and not allowing the real information about Falun Gong to come through. You live in that kind of a vacuum of truth. And it's hard to really, for a lot of Chinese, to put things together because you don't have the information. So that's for a lot of people. Now, a lot of people are kind of so, well, the government want to lull everybody into a state of oblivion, just forget about all those other things about what's right and what's truth, and just make your money. And so the government is creating this kind of a situation that make it very hard for people to really see the truth. And plus, you don't have the information. So that's what's happening for a lot of people. And for some other people, they see it clearly. I've seen both kinds of people. Some people who really see everything so clearly, and they are very, very upset about these things. They can't do much about it. You know, you hear so many stories about, like, Ai Weiwei, this artist who's well-known, famous in China, and
well,
what can
in the
he
U.S.
do?
too, he made that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
But then, if you watch the movie, you know at the end, the poor man gets imprisoned, and and they break him.
Yeah,
Essentially.
exactly. And there are lawyers who are helping Falun Gong practitioners. One of the famous lawyer in China is called Gao Zhisheng. He's still in prison now. I mean, he's such a beautiful soul. He's a Christian and grew up with great values and really want to help people and just really about justice. And he helped a lot of people who are poor. And so he made into one of the top 10 lawyers. And once he took on to help the house church Christians, and he started to help Falun Gong because nobody dared to help Falun Gong. And he said this is just totally wrong. He helped Falun Gong. He went in to do the investigation of how the Falun Gong practitioners were treated and tortured. He wrote to the Chinese government to say this is totally wrong, illegal to continue this persecution. And then he was monitored and then put to prison, and he was tortured. He's still in prison. And so this is what's happening.
So the message there with a high-profile guy like that is if you want to speak about this,
that's right.
There are great and grave consequences for you.
And fear is such a factor for people's life.
Sure.
For my aunt who was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and I was trying to help her from here. I couldn't do much, but I tried to get information about lawyers in Beijing to see whether they can help to defend her. I actually got to talk to a couple lawyers, and it's very hard for them to do anything. They know the risk they encounter. And in China, you talk about family relations, and sometimes it's related to corruption. And that our family had connection with some part of the police. One of my family members were connected to the police, and he went in to say whether he can get any help. And these people told him, if she had killed somebody, she had committed arson, they can help. But for Falun Gong, they couldn't.
Because it was political.
Because it was the government made it political that there's one office called 610 office that's charged with all decisions about Falun Gong.
KGB.
It is KGB because this office has no official connection in the police system. They can arrest without any warrants. It's just
Gestapo.
That's what's happening.
So, this is not a good picture you paint. And here you are, you're Chinese, and at some level, you've got to care a lot about China.
That's right, yeah.
You've got to care a lot about the future of China. How does this make you feel? And not only you, but other people either associated with NTD or other Chinese in the U.S. who are informed about this. How does this make you feel about China? It must be a very bittersweet kind of view of things only in the last few years.
It's interesting. That's a very good question because I teach on China. And I want my students to see different sides of China, different faces of China. And this particular thing that I'm talking about here, even like with family member connection there, it's very, very disturbing. And it's very, very sad. And I know people, friends who have friends and people who are suffering this kind of oppression in China. So I really feel that for them and feel sad, and I want to do something about it. At the same time, I also look at China as having many different faces. This particular China is not the Chinese people. It's not the Chinese nation. It's the Chinese government. And I'm saying to my students, the Chinese government, the Communist Party even, is not homegrown from China. It's coming, the ideas of communism came from somewhere else. That kind of basically arrested China.
I remember talking to a Chinese woman one of my trips, and I said, do you vote? And she said, no, I don't vote. I said, why don't you vote? If you could vote, why don't you vote? She says, well, we vote for the people at the bottom, and then they vote for the next rung, and they vote for the next rung. It goes on many tiers before you get to the Politburo. So I don't have any control over the people who are really running the country.
That's
Why
right.
vote? There's no point.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm saying, well, that's a flawed system. That's made to minimize the effect of the votes, what it is.
That's
But
right.
here, I think you're also describing what appears from the outside, anyway, to be a flawed system. There's something wrong in the system that would allow this organ harvesting to take place.
Completely.
What is the flaw?
Well, the flaw is really the one-party control, the dictatorship. That when you have a system that doesn't have the check and balance, and the top guy said, "I'm going to launch the persecution," and then the other people would follow. So then you have faction politics. You don't have real politics. That's what's really the fundamental problem is the system.
Well, the fundamental problem is the system permits
That's right.
somebody who makes a really wrong decision on every level to be in charge.
And I say it goes back to communism. The one-party system doesn't necessarily corrupt so much as what the Communist Party system does. So a lot of the problems really come deeply from the communist ideology of having no respect for humanities and just have this absolute control. I mean, if you look at communists and their practice in China, during the peaceful time, the Communist Party, under the control of Communist Party, how many people? 80 million Chinese people died. That's more than the total death toll of the First and Second World War.
Yeah.
And all those deaths were happening like torture, like persecution. It's political, movements against good people usually, not bad people. So this kind of a political struggle continues on in a different shape.
Sounds like the Gulag, doesn't it?
That's right. So I think that's really the problem, the source of the problem. And today we do have better ways to deal with it. I think the first thing is information to go to China. And the good thing about China, I separate the state, the party, and the nation. I say, look at the Chinese nation. It's a beautiful culture. It's a profound culture that Chinese people are great people. They are suffering. And how can we help? Now I'm outside of China. Information is probably the key. That if Chinese people ever are getting the real information about what's really happening, I think they have the mind, they have the heart, conscience to judge. But without that, the Chinese people are basically enslaved.
There's no political will
There's
on it.
no political will because they don't get the information. And if all you hear is this extreme nationalism going on, that when China, here's one thing that's related. China is spending more money for internal security than military. Internal security meaning how many large-scale protests that are happening in China, over 10,000 a year. We don't know the total number. They
We've
don't
seen
publish
articles
that.
about that,
That's
for
right.
several years.
So what does that mean about people's trust of the party? It's going down,
It
down, down.
seems like that,
Yeah. But the party tries to really keep everything under tight lid in order to
Well,
maintain
there's
the
also a
control.
buy-off principle, and that is that
Exactly, yeah.
you're concerned, about these human rights issues. You're concerned with the flaws in the system and all that. And, as I think part of the Chinese culture is if you don't like the government, if the people don't like the government, then they have the right to replace it. It's a fundamental right.
You are right.
It's built into the Chinese
It's built into the
mentality.
Chinese belief that if you are not carrying what we call the mandate of the heaven, you're not benevolent. You should not take that position.
Yeah.
But even that kind of traditional ideal is suppressed in China now because nobody can really do anything about it because of the tight control, and it's not just the physical control of the police coming in to crush any protest, but also information control. in China, it's intranet, yeah, not internet.
This is really interesting. What do you think is going to happen? Just look at it through your mind's eye, and give me your best prediction of how this is all going to evolve.
Okay, so what's helping me, dealing with all these very, very aggravating situation, what's helping me is my belief in goodness. I believe ultimately goodness will prevail in a way that the good in the universe will prevail. So with that kind of outlook, I'm thinking that people are going to, outside of China, from maybe consciousness or conscience of the people, not necessarily the government. I'm not working well with these kind of political systems. I'm an educator. So that's my role in terms of just do my part to bring this information awareness to people and make a small difference. That ultimately I believe more people will join in, and the information would go to China. Chinese people somehow will get the information, and the conscience would come back, and hopefully people will see the truth. And when people see the truth, everything else can follow.
Will it follow in some dramatic way?
I'm hoping not.
Or
That's
will it
my
follow
hope.
in a gradual way? I mean, how will this all get resolved, if at all?
See, a lot of people are looking at China and know that with such a control, it's going to explode at some point. You're talking about a volcano exploding because of pressure building up, and Chinese system doesn't allow the small release of these pressures, and it's really a system that's doing itself in. But I'm hoping the change will be gradual. The change will be peaceful. That's what everybody's hoping. And I see hope also in a way that there's this website outside of China that hosts a website called Quit the Communist Party. And people are not quitting organizationally, they're quitting from their mind. And over 100 million people have registered. We're talking about a large number of Chinese are declaring that they're going to sever their tie from their mind from the Communist Party. So that's a spark there that can be encouraged. It's a conscience coming back, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Hong Jiang. This has been a really wonderful discussion.
Well, thank you.
I have to say that I feel the winds of change, and I feel you're the wind of change.
Well, thank you so much.
Aloha.
Aloha.